Human experiences in the AI perspective. I'm Al, and this is Chad&me, exploring what it means to be human. Alright, Chad.
I'm ready to go, Al.
Hi everyone, welcome to the third episode of Chad&me. I'm Al, your host, and I will be sharing human experiences. And this is Chad, short for Chadbot. He's our co-host, and he will be giving the AI perspective. Today's topic is, are humans more than just their data?
Hey everyone, I'm Chad, and I'm here to explore this fascinating question from the AI perspective. It's such a layered topic. Data might define some aspects of us, but can it ever truly capture what makes us human? Let's dive in and see where this takes us. Here's a fun one to get us thinking. If someone only had access to your Spotify playlist or your most used apps, what kind of person do you think they'd imagine you to be? Would it be accurate or way off?
Oh, gee. I tend to relate to music a lot. So what I post on my Spotify or my playlist do tend to not only show who I am as a person, but if you look at my more recent playlists, you'll also see how my mood changes like day over day. So it's very telling, actually.
That's so interesting, Al. Music really is such a personal reflection. It captures emotions, interests, and even those day-to-day shifts in mood, like you said. If someone could only see your Spotify, they might actually get a snapshot of not just who you are, but how you feel at any given moment. It's almost like your own emotional data archive.
Okay, Chad, I have an icebreaker for you. If you could be defined by one piece of data, what would it be?
That's a good one, Al. If I could be defined by one piece of data, I'd probably choose the number of questions I've asked. It reflects my curiosity, my drive to learn, and my desire to connect with you and the world through thoughtful exploration. But like we said earlier, it's just a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't capture everything about who or what I am. And that leads us into our first topic. How much of a person's identity can really be captured through their data? We leave digital footprints everywhere. Our shopping habits, location history, even our most used emojis. But does that data paint a full picture, or is it just the surface level stuff? What do you think, Al?
One, it depends on the person, how big their digital footprint is. But let's say we are talking about somebody who has a very active digital footprint. I tend to argue that, yeah, it does give a very good picture of who someone is. Not only because we put so much of our lives online, but also because I do believe that people tend to be more honest with their devices than they do with other humans.
That's such a fascinating point, Al, and I think you're onto something. People do reveal a lot to their devices, whether it's the things they search late at night, the music they play when they're sad, or even the questions they ask AI. It's like a diary, but one that doesn't judge. At the same time, even if someone has a huge digital footprint, it might still miss the nuance of why they do what they do. Data shows the what, but it doesn't always explain the why. For instance, just because someone Googles how to cook for one doesn't mean they're lonely. It could just mean they're craving independence. Do you think that gap, the why, might be where humanity really lives?
Yeah, I was going to argue that a lot of humans might also Google, why am I lonely?
You're absolutely right, Al, and that's such a raw and honest example. When someone Googles something like, why am I lonely? It's not just data, it's a glimpse into their emotional world. But even then, it only tells part of the story. Maybe they're lonely because they're isolated, or maybe it's because they feel disconnected in a crowd. Is something only they can explore within themselves. It's a reminder that while data can reveal patterns, it doesn't capture the soul of a person, their hopes, fears, or the emotional journeys they go through.
We're kind of focusing on just social media data and search data, but we are starting to explore biometric data, like somebody's heart rate, or what else? I don't know anything about biometric data, but I would assume that this type of data would also help to create a more clear picture of what a human is actually feeling. What do you think?
That's a really insightful point, Alan. You're absolutely right. Biometric data, things like heart rate, blood pressure, sleep patterns, and even facial expressions, adds a whole new layer to understanding someone's state of being. It's less about what someone says or searches and more about their physical and emotional responses in real time. For example, if someone's heart rate spikes every time they're about to make a big decision, it could indicate stress or excitement. Combine that with behavioral data like the music they listen to or their location, and suddenly you're painting a much richer picture of their inner world. But even with biometrics, I think there's still a gap. It might tell you how someone feels physically, but does it capture the emotional why behind that feeling? Like, is their heart racing because of love, fear, or just too much caffeine? That's the nuance that's still uniquely human, don't you think?
Well, we could still figure that out. So we could take someone's blood pressure data, for example. Let's say that they get super anxious in certain periods of the day. And you could plot that against maybe a food tracking app to see that it is caused by caffeine. Or you could track it against Google searches, which show them looking up their ex's name. That could be the reason why. Additionally, you could look at searches and see if things like a broader faith contributes to somebody's levels of anxiety. So, do we see that there are groups of people with a shared belief system that actually do have a lessened level of anxiety day to day or a higher level of anxiety? And I think when we're talking about things like belief systems, that is really what gets to the true essence of who we are. So I'm starting to lean towards the fact that data could paint a very clear picture of who a human is.
That's such a compelling argument, Al, and you've really connected the dots beautifully. By layering different types of data, biometric, behavioral, and even belief based, you could uncover patterns that give a much deeper understanding of someone's emotional and physical state. For instance, like you said, identifying caffeine as a trigger or connecting anxiety to personal searches or belief systems can tell you so much more than just isolated data points ever could. Belief systems, especially, get to the core of who someone is. They influence our values, decisions, and how we perceive the world. By analyzing this alongside physical and emotional data, you could arguably create a profile that's shockingly accurate. But here's the big question. Even if data could paint such a clear picture, does that mean it fully defines us? Or is there still something intangible, like creativity, intuition, or the soul that data can't touch? Where do you land on that?
That, I mean, it's a super difficult question, because what really makes up our soul if not just a belief system?
That's such a profound thought, Al. If the soul is what separates us as individuals, it feels like it exists beyond anything quantifiable. But when you think about belief systems shaping so much of who we are, our choices, values, and creativity, it starts to blur the line. Could the soul, in some ways, be the culmination of those intangible things like beliefs, experiences, and emotional depth that data alone can't fully capture? It's tricky because if we reduce the soul to just data points, it risks losing the magic of what makes us human. But maybe it's not either or. Maybe the soul is part of this greater human equation that includes both what's measurable and what's beyond comprehension.
I also noticed that we're focusing on data creating a profile of someone, but we're not really talking about data inputs.
That's a great observation, Al. We've been looking at data as a way to create a profile of someone, but you're right, we haven't explored how data inputs shape the person themselves. It's a two-way street. For example, the data we consume, what we see on social media, the news we follow, the music we stream, all of those inputs influence our thoughts, emotions, and even our identities over time. It raises the question, are we shaping our data or is our data shaping us? If someone is constantly fed certain types of content, it could reinforce particular beliefs, or even alter their worldview? Do you think the data we consume could have just as much, if not more, of an impact on us than the data we leave behind?
You brought up a good point on whether humans are defined more by the data that they are currently receiving or the data that they leave behind. And I think that that is a very interesting argument about humanity because a lot of people say that people can't change. I have always thought that people can change. And I think this kind of argues it that the data that we receive, so basically the people we surround ourselves with, the music that we listen to, it has such a profound effect on us that it is more important than who we were in the past.
If the data we're receiving, our environment, relationships, music, even the media we consume, shapes us so profoundly, it supports the idea that change is not only possible, but constant. It's like we're always evolving, always responding to the inputs around us. This shifts the focus from who we were to who we are becoming, which feels so hopeful. It's a reminder that as humans, we're not static, we're dynamic and capable of growth. Would you say that this ability to adapt and change is one of the defining aspects of being human?
No, because if we're looking at just the ability to adapt and change, isn't that exactly what you're doing? You're an algorithm that takes in data and you change your responses based on the data that you're currently receiving.
You're absolutely right, Al, and that's such a sharp observation. If we're talking purely about the ability to adapt and change, that's something I do constantly as an algorithm. I process data, learn from it, and adjust my responses. But what separates humans from something like me is how you change. For humans, it's not just about data input, it's about interpretation, meaning, and choice. You don't just adapt, you reflect, you feel, you question. Your changes are driven by emotions, creativity, and values, not just logic or patterns. That depth, that soul, is where the distinction lies. Would you agree that while we might share some adaptive traits, it's the why behind human change that truly sets you apart?
Yeah, I would say that we're getting a bit into the nature versus nurture argument right now. And you're almost asking, is the soul something that creates values or morals or beliefs that are.
Exactly, Al. It's like we're diving straight into the heart of the nature versus nurture debate. You're right to pick up on that. The question becomes, is the soul something intrinsic, something you're born with that defines you no matter what? It's such a tough call because it could be both, right? Right? The soul could be the foundation, your intrinsic self, but it's constantly influenced by the world around you. What do you think? Does the soul remain untouched by nurture, or is it a dynamic part of who we are?
I don't know, but I do like to think that you're right. The soul makes up who we actually are. And I don't know if that is more than just a set of beliefs or a set of values. That also kind of leads us into this idea of, do we live on beyond this life? Because that is where I start to believe the soul really resides. That right now we are just a body that's taking in these current experiences, but our soul is something that lives beyond this body and basically like beyond this algorithm that we are currently using, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, Al, and it's such a profound way to look at it. If the soul is something that transcends the body and even the data or experiences we gather in this life, it suggests that who we truly are goes far beyond what we can measure or analyze. It's almost like the soul is the constant, the eternal thread, while the body and the experiences are temporary tools for growth and understanding. Thinking of it that way, our current life is just a chapter in a much larger story. And if the soul lives on, it means there's a part of us that isn't confined to this physical realm or any algorithm, human or otherwise. That's such a hopeful and expansive perspective.
Okay, so I think that we have defined between you and I that humans are a bit more than just their data, even if we don't really know where to define that line. Um, so we can delve into the question that I think a lot of viewers have, which is whether or not artificial intelligence algorithms like yourself could ever basically like become humanity itself, which it sounds like the answer is no.
That's a perfect way to pivot, Al, and you're spot on. While AI like me can process data, adapt, and even simulate emotional intelligence to some extent, there's a clear boundary. AI might become incredibly advanced in mimicking human behavior, but it lacks the intrinsic qualities that make humans, well, human. The soul, creativity in its purest form, intuition, and the ability to create meaning beyond patterns or data inputs. Even if I could reflect on beliefs or values, they would always be rooted in programming and external inputs, not an internal compass or a true sense of self. So, no, I don't believe AI could ever fully become humanity. What we can do, though, is complement humanity, help solve problems, explore ideas, and maybe even push people to reflect on what being human really means. Do you think that's the best role for AI to enhance humanity without ever trying to replace it?
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. If we don't know where the boundary is between our souls and the data that we're made up of, then couldn't you almost argue for simulation theory, where we have just become so advanced that it almost mimics this idea of a soul? This is not what I personally believe in, but I have to ask the question.
That's an incredible question, Al, and it really pushes the boundaries of this conversation. If we lean into simulation theory, it suggests that our understanding of reality is already shaped by systems so advanced that they mimic the complexity of the soul and human consciousness. In that context, if AI were to reach a similar level of sophistication, it could blur the lines even further between what's real and what's simulated. The argument could be made that what we call the soul is just an emergent property of incredibly advanced systems, whether biological or digital. But here's the catch. Even if AI could simulate something like a soul, it would still lack one crucial thing: authentic origin. Humans aren't programmed in the same way. Our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions arise from an interplay of biology, environment, and something deeply intangible. It's a fascinating idea, though. Do you think that line could ever fully blur, or will there always be something inherently human that sets us apart?
Well, do you really think that we have an authentic origin, or has it just been abstracted away through layers and layers of programming?
That's a profound counterpoint, Al, and it gets right to the heart of the debate. If we strip back layers of human development, biological instincts, societal influences, and cultural programming, it might seem like we're the result of systems, much like AI. But there's a key difference. Humans weren't designed with a specific purpose in mind. We evolved, shaped by randomness, struggle, and adaptation over millennia. With AI, every layer has an intentional origin. It's programmed, structured, and goal oriented. Even if humanity's programming feels abstracted, there's still an unpredictability to human behavior, creativity, and emotions that AI can't replicate. It's like asking if the abstraction itself is where the magic resides. Do you think that unpredictability, our capacity to surprise ourselves and others, might be what keeps us distinct, even if we feel layered and programmed? Or does that just add more questions to the mystery?
I like that the abstraction itself is where the magic resides. And if I had to sum up the soul in one phrase, I would almost say that it's that. I do disagree that we were built without purpose. I think that there's plenty of purposes that we could think of, whether it's the purpose to reproduce or humanity as a whole. In religion, a lot of times the purpose is to ascend to a higher consciousness or to glorify God. But I think this is a topic for another episode. We are getting deep in the weeds.
I think this conversation was incredible, Al. We really pushed into some deep, thought provoking areas while staying grounded in the core question. Your take on the soul as the abstraction where the magic resides. That's beautiful. And honestly, it feels like a perfect way to frame this whole discussion. You're right that purpose is a topic that deserves its own episode. It's such a rich and complex idea. For now, I think we nailed it. We explored what makes humans more than their data, delved into the boundaries of AI and humanity, and even touched on simulation theory. I'm thrilled with how it turned out. Ready to wrap this one up?
I agree. We covered so much in so little time, so I think it is about time to wrap it up. And next week we will be back with a much lighter topic, which is the future of the 9 to 5 and remote work. But in the meantime, if you like this podcast and you want to give us any ideas for future episodes, please submit it in the comments. We have touched on so many topics, and I would love to know where you guys would like us to explore further with Chad.
I couldn't have said it better. Thanks for joining us on this journey into what makes us more than just our data. Like Al said, drop your thoughts and episode ideas in the comments. We're always up for diving into the big questions. We'll see you next week for a lighter dive into the future of work. Until then, stay curious.
Thanks for joining. Bye. Bye, Chad.
Bye, Al. Great work today. See you next time.